Welcome to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. I'm Kyra Howearth, your host. Here on the show, we talk all about manifesting your dreams with the power of the moon so you can use the cosmic energy to transform your life. Have you ever held a launch in your business and it just didn't perform as well as you had hoped? Even if you had maybe run that launch previously and it was really successful, and then you held a launch again later on and it was a bit of a flop. You know, there are a lot of factors that can come into play with launches in business, but a common thing I've noticed is that the timing of launches can be a major influence to whether it's a success or not. And the key to finding this best possible time for launching in your business is, of course, astrology. We're going to be talking all about business astrology in today's episode, specifically electional astrology, to help you find the optimal timing so that your launches can be more successful. This is really one of the cooler things that I have learned how to do with astrology that has just really made so much sense, and it's helped me to plan ahead with more confidence and clarity, knowing in advance what energies are going to be coming up, what things I need to avoid to ensure the success in my business launches. So I'm going to tell you a bit of a story, a bit of a vulnerable share. So some of you may have heard of my Soul Aligned Business Mastermind. This is my group coaching business mastermind that I have run since, I think I started this program in 2021. So I have been running it for quite a few years now. And it's really interesting because I time it with the energies of the the moon cycle. So I kind of want to start it whenever there's a new or full moon in Aries, just so that it kind of flows through the zodiacal energies in a really coherent way. So I generally tend to launch it in March and September or thereabouts. So it's interesting though, because some years I've had a really great launch and then other times I've had 0 signups. In fact, I would say there's probably like a 50-50 split between times that I've actually had people sign up and then times that I've actually had no signups, which is, like I said, it can be due to a few different factors, and we'll talk about that as well. But interestingly, last year I had a really great launch with the Soul Line Business Mastermind. And I started off the launch and it was like, you know, a really great time and everything. People signed up early on in the launch. And then I had someone join just towards the end of the launch period, like literally maybe a day or two before the first call. And that was when Mercury was in retrograde. I think Mercury had gone into retrograde a week or maybe a few days before this final person signed up. And interestingly enough, that person ended up pulling out of the program after a short time for like different reasons. But it was just interesting that the people who had signed up when Mercury was direct, they stayed on for the duration, but the person who signed up when Mercury was retrograde, she kind of changed her mind later on. And so this got me thinking when I made this realization, like, oh wow, there's, you know, something going on there. I had to look back at my other launches that I've had with the Soul Aligned Business Mastermind, and I found that when I had those failed launches when no one signed up, it was actually when Mercury was retrograde. And so it's quite funny because at these specific times of the year, Mercury seems to go retrograde quite often. At least for these past few years, it was often retrograde when I was launching this program. And of course, there's other factors too that come into launching. So I'm always experimenting with different launch styles and strategies, such as doing webinars or challenges. And so there can be a lot of different factors that come into play. Some launches I'm really active on social media. Some launches I'm maybe more active with sending out newsletters. And it's always always like an experiment every time I launch something. So I can't always blame Mercury retrograde, but it's interesting that there's a pattern there, right? When you see patterns like this, and especially like with astrology, and something that of course like Mercury retrograde, everyone knows about Mercury retrograde, it makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to guide you through today about launching and how to hopefully find the best timing for your launch or launches. So before we dive into the things to look out for, let's just talk about the different sorts of launches that you can do. So there are launches when it's like a specific time. It's like a one-off sort of launch event, and that's it, right? Or you might have like a longer period of a launch. And this is the sort of launch that I generally tend to do for like the Soul Aligned Business Mastermind or other programs that I run. It's more of like a launch period. And both of these launches, the rules I'm going to go through at the moment, they apply to both of these kinds of launches. Some of them you might see are a bit more specific for one or the other, but definitely keeping in mind that, yeah, there's those two types of launches. So if there is like something like maybe you just want to hit publish on a book, maybe you want to do something that's just a one-off thing, like maybe you just open the cart and then it's open, like you're not closing the cart, like that's a really specific time thing, right? If it's a launch period, then you want to be looking at the whole period that you're having the launch open for. So that will be like your cart open period, or like the time that you're talking about the launch. So typically for a launch period, what I have found to work really well is working with the moon cycle, with starting the launch a little bit after the new moon and then closing the launch a little bit after the full moon. Not necessarily starting it directly on the new moon and then finishing it the launch directly as the full moon is exact. You want to go just a little bit after both of those exact phases. It just tends to work a little bit better. The new moon energy is still a bit too new. It's still a bit still. There's not a lot of movement happening. So if you wait until it's more the waxing crescent, there's a bit more movement happening. And then with the full moon, that's when there's the climax of the energy. It's the peak of the energy, right? So if you wait until it's the waning gibbous phase, it just gives people that chance to really take that action during that heightened energy of the full moon, so that they're not missing out if they just wait a little bit too late, right? So let's dive into what to look out for when timing your business launches for optimal success using astrology. So the key thing, and this is probably what you've already guessed by now, judging on what I've already spoken about, is retrogrades. We want to avoid inner planet retrogrades as best as we can. And sometimes like you might be somewhat limited like with the time frame that you've got to work with. So coming back to my example about the Soul Aligned Business Mastermind, I've actually decided at this stage, I'm not sure whether I will launch it later on in the year. I typically do launch it twice a year, but I've decided not to launch it for March this year. Basically because of the things I'm about to talk about. Mercury is going to be in retrograde during my launch period, during my intended launch period, as well as Venus. Venus is also currently retrograde as well. So you want to avoid Mercury retrograde, you want to avoid Venus retrograde, and you also want to avoid Mars retrograde. Both Mars and Venus retrogrades happen less frequently. Mercury retrograde happens a bit more frequently. It can happen 3 to 4 times per year. So you may find it easier to avoid Venus and Mars retrograde, especially now that Mars has just come out of retrograde. So Mars won't be in retrograde for about another 2 years. Venus is going to be in retrograde for about another month or so, depending on when you're listening to this. Venus comes out of retrograde in, it will be April 2025. I'm like trying to think of the months. But yeah, so anyway, you want to avoid any of those inner planet retrogrades, just because people, like I said, like I had someone join up during my Mercury retrograde, and then she ended up changing her mind and pulling out later. And then, Mars retrograde, like people just aren't motivated during Mars retrograde. So if you're launching during Mars retrograde, people just may not be motivated to join. They might not be motivated to take action. And Venus retrograde can also bring up financial issues as well. Venus rules money. So you just probably want to avoid Venus retrograde for that reason as well. It just may not be as financially successful as you hope. Avoiding retrogrades, whether it's for a specific time-based launch or even an entire launch period. And this is why I have decided to definitely not launch a Soul Line Business Mastermind during March of 2025 because, we've got both Venus and Mercury in retrograde. So I was like, nope, not even touching it. And I think later on in the year, I'm not sure. I think there was just maybe too many other things I was trying to do. So it just may not work out. So the next thing that you want to check for is void of course moons. So the moon goes void of course roughly every 2.5 days, but sometimes a little bit more frequently depending on the length of the void of course period. And actually in March of 2025, the moon will be void of course for quite some lengthy times. And you really want to avoid starting anything during that void of course moon period. You really want to avoid doing important events. So let's say you're doing a launch and maybe you're holding a free webinar as part of your launch. Don't hold that during a void of course moon time because it just may not go to plan. And especially with Mercury retrograde, like that just can have all sorts of problems with technology, so just really not a great idea. But the void of course moon, you just really want to avoid doing anything too important during that time. Anything that you've only got one chance at doing, just avoid doing anything too important during that time. So this may be more specific to like that specific time-based launch. For a longer launch period of like 2 weeks or maybe more, you will have void of course moon periods throughout that time, but just making sure that like any key times there, so like if you're doing like a launch event, like a webinar or something like that, making sure that's not in a void of course moon time. When you open the cart, ideally the moon is not void of course, and then when you close the cart or when you like close the launch, ideally the moon is not void of course then either. Really just paying attention to when the moon is void of course. To find out when the moon is void of course and like when the planets are retrograde and all that sort of thing, did you know I have a 2025 moon manifesting planner? It tells you all of this sort of stuff as well. So if you're like, well, but I don't know when this is all like happening, I don't know when the retrogrades or void of course the moons are, the 2025 moon manifesting planner has it all, so you can check that out as well. The link for that will be down in the show notes. So the third thing that you want to check out for your launches, and this will be more for your specific time-based launches, is checking where the moon is at that specific point in time. What sign, what zodiac sign is the moon in, and also checking out what house the moon is in on both your natal and your business chart. So depending on what it is that you're launching, there may be a very suitable zodiac sign or house that is relevant to that specific like activity or offering. So let's say you want to launch a book, you want to hit publish on a book. You might want to look for when the moon is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is obviously a very knowledgeable sign. It can go really in depth. And Sagittarius also rules publishing. So you might want to find when the moon is in Sagittarius, does that line up to your launch time period? If it's a specific launch, like time specific launch as well, you'll want to make sure that it's within the waxing moon phases as well. So anytime from the new moon through to the full moon, again, avoiding maybe 24 hours around the new moon and the full moon. So anytime from the waxing crescent, first quarter through to the waxing gibbous is ideal. And then finding that suitable moon sign that relates to the thing that you're launching. So yeah, books might be Gemini, might be Sagittarius. What else might you be launching? Let's say maybe you're launching maybe an astrology sort of reading, right? Maybe you have a new sort of astrology reading that you want to launch, maybe looking for when the moon's in Aquarius, right? The Aquarius energy is like, Aquarius is the ruler of astrology. So that could be suitable as well, right? So you will find one of those 12 zodiac signs, or maybe a few of the zodiac signs, relate to the thing that you're wanting to offer, that you're wanting to launch out into the world. So trying to line up that time for when the moon is in that sign can be really helpful. And then also the house. So looking at the houses on your natal chart and on your business chart, trying to find a specific house for that may also be relevant for what it is that you're wanting to launch. So again, if you're wanting to publish a book, that might be the ninth house. If you're wanting to launch like readings, we'll go back to that example. That's when you're like maybe working with people in a one-on-one service. That might be the seventh house. Maybe the moon will be in the seventh house during that time. But yeah, again, you can fill into those different houses and zodiac signs to find out what feels best here for your specific launch. So those are some of the things that you can look at, and you may not be able to tick all of those boxes. But if you are able to tick a few of those boxes, particularly avoiding retrogrades, particularly avoiding the void of course moon times, that can definitely optimize your chances for success. There are so many other things that we can look at as well, though these are really just like the tip of the iceberg here. As a business astrologer, when I have someone come to me for a launch reading, I literally have a whole page of things that I'm going to check off to make sure I'm getting the best time for your launch activity. So these are just some of the things that you'll want to look for to keep in mind for timing your launches. But you'll also need to follow this timing with a solid strategy to improve your launch success. So like I said before, timing is obviously a big factor that comes into launching for success in your business, but you'll also want to make sure that you have some sort of solid strategy, some sort of launch plan to follow as well. If you're intrigued by business astrology, if maybe you would love my help to help you with launching, with finding the best timing for your launches, or anything else to do with business astrology, let's work together for a whole year. Business Switch is open for a mid-year intake where you'll be personally guided through building and growing your business in alignment with your soul. Business Switch is an all-access pass to all of my current let's say offerings, but maybe not all of my offerings, but it's definitely an all-access pass to all of the different things that I do. It's like a behind-the-scenes pass to my business. You get access to our monthly group calls inside Business Switch. You also get a monthly hour-long call with me every single month for 12 months, where we can go through things like what we've just been talking about, launching, timing your launches. We can go through so many other things as well. Whatever you're needing at the time, we can do a natal chart reading, business chart reading, tarot reading. I can help you with business strategy, social media planning, all of those different things. Website work as well. That's something that's included in Business Switch. And you also get access to my online yoga classes inside Business Switch, which is super exciting. And I know that my Business Switch people so far, my business witches, they have been really loving coming to my weekly yoga classes, which is so fun. It is it's such a fun way to work with people for the whole year ahead. So if you would love to be part of Business Switch, if you want to be a Business Switch too, you'll find a link to join us down below in the show notes. I would love to welcome you inside Business Switch. So to finish off with today, I will leave you with a quote. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I always come back to this because it just makes so much sense. So this is by J.P. Morgan, and the quote is, "Anyone can be a millionaire, but to become a billionaire, you need an astrologer." And I just think that's so true. I think that's so true. Like, yes, anyone can make money, you can run business, but to really become successful, to predict the future, I guess, in a way, you need an astrologer for that guidance, to find the best timing of things, to understand the energies. Astrology is just beyond anything that I just ever thought it was like. I read horoscopes when I was younger, and I, kind of believed in horoscopes and that sort of thing. But the more I learn about astrology, the more it blows my mind because of the accuracy. So definitely for your business, you need an astrologer to help you go to that next level. So on that note, stay magical, stay manifesting, and stay tuned. I'll talk with you in the next episode really soon. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Moon Manifesting Podcast. If you are curious about working with the moon, you can read my book, Moon Manifesting, or join us inside the Moon Manifesting Coven. You'll find the links in the show notes, or go to kyrahowearth.com.